5-yard line.
It is week 8 in the NFL. Welcome into the show. It is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2019. This is the Audible on sportsbookreview.com. Jimmy is in, as we say, from a famous rock band in Panama. So he's going to be off today. It's me and the Whale Capper. It's week 8 in the NFL. This is the show that we kick off the week, take that ground look and say, you know what? Maybe some things that we see early in the week we can play into later in the week in some action. Whale Capper, you're here. I'm here. Let's get it going. How's it going, my friend?
It's a great day, man. Beautiful here in Southern California. It's hot, actually. No fall in the air at all. It's quite warm. But happy to be joining you on a Tuesday for a special edition of the Audible.
Yeah, it's good. We had to pull Whale Capper out there. Lucy gets, hang out during the week, do his things, podcasts. He actually has some real work he has to do. But we're able to pull him out, come in from the bullpen, have some fun with us, and sort of set up this week, and we'll have some fun doing it. Week's progression this week. I didn't actually see the final picks, Whale Capper, that you have. I had a slight winning week at 4-3 overall last week to finally end my 2-week slide here on the Audible show. Your picks yourself, Whale Capper. How did you end up last week on the show here on the Audible?
So I was 3-4, but one of my wins was a nice money line plus 151. So I think I'm down half a unit for the week. It was frustrating, though, I have to tell you. I mean, even at 3-4, like you would think, like, oh yeah, well that's not so bad. Like you'll fight, live to fight again another week. But my read on a bunch of these sides has been really, really not great, and it's frustrating. And like the overall feeling of the NFL, like last night, like. No points spread is too high enough to lay for the Patriots. No, no way in hell you can back, some of these terrible teams like the Cincinnati Bengals. You think, oh, they're home. Maybe they finally put it together, play a little nice game. They're inside the number for most of that game, and then it just all falls apart. I thought your Tennessee pick was pretty strong. They should have gotten that first half play for you. I know they ended up with a full game win. But a lot of frustrating results here in the NFL. Really, the only thing that I have going for me is my Ravens love is paying off. But hopefully we've kind of convinced people to get on board with the Saints at some point here before Drew Brees comes back, because I got to tell you, they are positioning themselves marvelously for a deep run in the playoffs with the fact that they're getting wins even in spite of Drew Brees being on the sideline.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I like doing the Tuesday shows here, and it's good to get your opinion because usually me and Jimmy will take a little bit of a look back before we look forward, and I love to go back because I'm one of the cappers that I actually enjoy the losses to scratch my head and say, what did I actually look at this football game and what actually went wrong? And I keep on getting back to the Chicago Bears, Whale. And I'm talking about this game, as a concept-wise, saying you had a couple weeks off to get ready for this game. You had the New Orleans Saints off a tough, hard-fought road win in Jacksonville, now coming into your building without their most efficient player, which would be the running back, Alvin Kamara. Teddy Bridgewater, who's shown signs. He played very well this year in managing and actually 5-0 in place of Drew Brees. I can't believe watching the Chicago Bears on offense, the concepts that they're running out there, trying to lean on the running game, that's not working. Mitchell Trubisky looks like a one-read quarterback that is first read. If it isn't there, he doesn't even care and still throws the football. I usually pride myself, and you always joke with me, like on a read on like the Chicago Bears. They were so poor. I mean, so poor last week in that football game. It was actually shocking to me.
Yeah, I agree with you on this. And honestly, this is a little tinfoil hat conspiracy theory here, so bear with me. But we saw and heard a lot of kind of rumblings in the preseason and the offseason that, Nagy wasn't really happy with what he was getting out of Mitch Trubisky as far as progressions, as far as learning the offense, as far as being able to, develop as a sustainable franchise starting quarterback. And I kind of wonder if there's not like a little behind the scenes kind of palace intrigue going on there where, the management and, and the ownership who bought in on Mitch Trubisky traded up for him, took him over Mahomes, took him over Watson. If they feel like, look, we need to, let's start making our guy look good, we need to, quiet the fans here on this Trubisky thing because it's making us look bad. Meanwhile, Nagy's incentivized to specifically put Mitch into disadvantaged situations, to ask him to do too much, to not really, give him the opportunity to, have short makeable third downs. Like, he kind of wants to expose him, and so that he can move on as quickly as possible, and we can get another guy in here who can run my system more effectively. So I have a funny feeling that this isn't as clean and as easy and obvious as it looks from the outside. It feels a little bit like Nagy needs to get Trubisky out of there, and the only way he can do it is by really exposing the kid. And, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but when you have 2 weeks to prepare and that's what you run out there for offense, you have to start asking these kind of questions.
Yeah, two other games I do want to take a look at here with you, because I think that Ravens bandwagon that we jumped on last week, I was getting them at +3. I think you even took a money line, which was awesome in that football game. And watching it, having money on it, sure, it's one thing. But I actually get, a little bit of pride out of taking a look at the Ravens and how they actually play football, because when you go on the road and you play Seattle, field goals don't win football games there. What a key drive in the last few moments of the third quarter to have a 3rd and 15 with Lamar Jackson. He runs the ball to set up a 4th and 2, and the team comes off the field to kick the field goal. And you wouldn't be able to knock the, head coach, hey, look, we're late into the second half. Let's take the lead and see what happens. Calls him over, just asks a simple question to Lamar Jackson and says, hey, you want to go for this? Gets all fired up. You knew Lamar Jackson was running this football. This wasn't going to get handed off or read optioned or roll out and pass the football. Takes it in for the touchdown. And right there, I'm looking at this saying, this is a well-oiled machine on offense, just the way their schemes are coming across. You know Lamar Jackson. You know the Ravens want to run the football, and yet you can't stop it. And we're talking about a football game that if you watch, rainier conditions, slippery surface, not many people making plays for Lamar Jackson in the passing game, and he willed himself to that win. And how about Marcus Peters coming over saying, you know what, our backside of our secondary a little bit depleted, makes probably the play of the football game where Seattle's going in the score. He runs a pick six back. That was awesome. I had it +3. You had it money line. It's fun watching the Ravens. The schemes they come up with, are fantastic right now.
Yeah, again, that was a perfect kind of encapsulation, and it's pretty exciting because that's like the opposite of what we're seeing with Nagy and Trubisky. Like, Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson are coming together like perfectly, and it's amazing that he was the 5th overall quarterback taken in the draft last year behind Mayfield, Darnold, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen. All 4 of those guys look like they are having humongous setbacks this year. Lamar Jackson, on the other hand, in the conversation for league MVP. And I think you have to give a lot of the credit to the coaching staff. Harbaugh brought in a guy in Roman who really is working well with him in terms of emphasizing his strengths. They brought in this kind of dynamic passing attack early in the season when the weather was nice, when they were going up against some softer teams, to really make sure that, defenses knew that they had to respect the passing ability. They couldn't just stack boxes and play like the Chargers did last year in the playoffs. And they've set themselves up here for a nice little run, and it's going to be fascinating to see what this Patriots defense does to Lamar Jackson in 2 weeks. And in fact, I'm more excited about that game, that Pats-Baltimore game in 2 weeks, than I am about any game on this week's card. This week's card stinks. And that's a tough way, I know, to set up a show where we're going to break down the weekend card. But boy, man, I feel like I should go on bye week this week just because this is a nasty slate.
A lot of high nasty ones. We're going to get to the Thursday game in just a moment, which again must view TV for Thursday night for the Redskins and the Minnesota Vikings. That's certainly going to be a choice that we're going to have to decide. One other game, which I think we get a little bit trumped up for this one, because I think we were on the ground floor of this one, especially you, El Capper, over the summer, telling people you're not sure Mariota should even start the season. It should be Tannehill, because we were riding that steam in the preseason, saying, you know what, Ryan Tannehill wants to be the starting quarterback here. This is going to be a big move for him. So when he gets in the game, they're going to be calling plays for him. They want to see what he has, and he performed well in the preseason. And guess what? Looking back at the last couple possessions with the Denver Broncos, which they didn't even score in that game for the Titans, they moved the football efficiently. They did the same thing on Sunday. Tannehill throws for over 300 yards in a game that was really slow. It wasn't like he had, 17, 18 possessions in this game. In the first half, I believe they only had 3 possessions, but scoring, timely scoring, playing well. The one thing we always knock Tannehill a little bit, which is going to happen, holds on to the ball a little bit too long, not the greatest athlete in the pocket. He did end up coming up with an interception against him when the ball was tipped. But just from an interesting perspective there, the Titans -2 holding on at the end. And I'll be damned, it was the right move absolutely by Vrabel to quarterback sneak on 4th and a half of an inch. Looked like he clearly got the first down. The refs come out and measure it and say he lost a half yard and almost went downhill. A wild game. But how about this? The Titans have an offense with Tannehill here.
Tough toughest handicap of the week, in my opinion, coming up now and trying to figure out Tampa Bay off a bye. Do you stick with what's working with the change in Tannehill being live, or do you look for Bruce Arians' team coming off of extra rest to put too much pressure on this team? But I agree with you. It was a great spot for Tennessee, and they needed some pretty incredible stops there at the very tail end of that game. But they got their win, and they're back in the winner's circle. And the LA Chargers, on the other hand, pretty much can call it a season.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, that game too, Will, because I was sitting on a team total. I'd gotten early in the week, and so I was like, we always talk about, closing line value and what you end up with. I got 20 as a team total on Monday once they made that maneuver and said, you know what, Tannehill's going to start over Mariota. The line closed at 22.5, but I'm sitting here watching the game, right? Because I'm sitting on a 22, on a 20. They go down, they score the touchdown. It's like, all right, 17, I just need a field goal. And up pops up on my screen when I'm not paying attention, a missed extra point. And I said, you know how this usually comes down to it. But they did end up punching in their touchdown. But it's one of those things where you say, only going against you, because, of course, nothing ever bad goes against anybody. But you always feel it's on yourself. That missed extra point, I was like, they're going to end at 19, and I'm going to be crying in my milk. Because regardless of getting the best line possible in that game, I'm still going to end up losing because of a missed extra point. So thank God that didn't happen. Let's move to Week 8 here, where we got a couple games that we can hit here on the card and have some fun with tonight. Look, 101, 102 Thursday Night Football. Keenum, Cousins, is Adam Thielen going to suit up for this football game? Are we going to get what kind of injuries we're going to get back for the Washington Redskins? I think that I saw Adrian Peterson was going to give it a go, whether it even matters or not. 15.5 across the board in this football game. Just some simple statistics. And Washington statistics are going to theoretically take a bath in that rain from what they had in the past game versus the 49ers. Well, listen to some of these numbers on offense here. 12.9 points per game. 267 total yards per game, 183 yards passing per game, 85 yards on the ground, and a yards per play of 4.9 going up against one of the more elite defenses for the Minnesota Vikings at home in the Dome, revved up and ready, fresh off a victory on Sunday off the Detroit Lions. What can we expect from the Washington Redskins in this game, especially on offense here?
I don't know. It's a disaster what's going on there. And I don't in any way, shape, or form have faith that Bill Callahan has any answers at all for this Vikings defense. The Vikings defense is playing superbly right now. I know that they gave up some points and some passing yards to Matt Stafford and company, but he's playing great right now. I wouldn't really hold that against the Vikings at all. I think the likelihood that you could see back-to-back shutouts for the Redskins is live. The fact that Adrian Peterson had as many carries as he did last week, and yet this is setting up as like the major narrative heading into this game is going to be Peterson's big homecoming to Minnesota, and that they're going to try to feature him and give him extra carries. Like, that's not going to work. So this is set up pretty well for looking for the Vikings or nothing. The question is, can you stomach laying double-digit points on a Kirk Cousins team? And granted, he's got a motivational angle in this game as well. But I'm just looking at this Redskins squad. They are playing extremely poor offensively, and nothing that they have done since the coaching change is giving you any indication that they're going to all of a sudden wake up and play like an amazing game of football. But interesting Thursday night game just from the narrative standpoint, with Peterson going home, Case Keenum going home. To where 2 years ago he carried that team to an NFC title game, and then of course Kirk Cousins will be a big story as well. So weird little homecoming revenge sort of narratives, angles. I don't think any of that matters. I think this is entirely about how many points do the Vikings feel like scoring. Is it mostly Dalvin Cook or Stefon Diggs? Because I don't think we'll see Thielen in this one. Chance for some defensive scores for the Vikings. I think this is looking for maybe a Vikings team total over is a fun angle here, because they can win this one 28-0 or 42-0, kind of whatever they choose, as far as I can tell you.
Yeah, taking a look at points per game there, Minnesota 27 and close to 400 yards of offense. A lot of that on the ground. Third overall in rushing at 160 yards per game and a yards per play of 6.4. The interesting thing, because last weekend I actually came up with one of my personal plays that I had, minus 9.5 from the 49ers versus the Washington Redskins. As we all saw, it was 9-0. San Francisco did have some shots to try to cover that in the second half, but once we saw the rain coming down, it was pretty much who's going to run the most and who's not going to turn the football over, which turned to be the Washington Redskins that were making the most mistakes mistakes in that football game. But one of my caps, take out the deluge of the rain, and I thought, there's going to be some rain in the forecast, but I didn't think the field would be that bad. No Thompson out of the backfield is going to help out Case Keenum. Nobody really a tight end on that quick valve, and the same thing is going to poke its head and come true, I believe, in the Dome, because you're talking about a really good defense and a really good defensive coordinator. So when the pass rush heat is coming on, it's nice to have that little scat back to dump it off for, whether or not you get 5 or 6 yards, but just as one of those outlets, or a healthy athletic tight end over the middle, because when the pass rush comes in from the front 7, you got to get the ball quickly. That's usually your first option. I don't see very many options for Washington, so it's an interesting point, that back-to-back shutout look for the Redskins, because the one thing that we've seen in pro football this year is when teams know they really can't score and they get down double digits in the second half, well, they're no longer kicking field goals at that point. They're going for touchdowns at will now.
Great point. Yeah, once you're down more than 2 scores, there's no point in kicking field goals. Even although Bill Callahan, do we know if he knows the rules, or is he the kind of guy that's like, well, we need the points? Most of the stuff that we're seeing and most of the stuff that he's saying pre and post games is indicating that he's probably one of the worst coaches in the league. So maybe he's the kind of guy that will kick field goals down to make a 3-score game a 3-score game. You never know. But I think that the Vikings really will dictate this one, whistle to whistle here, and I'm considering laying the points, to be honest with you, or staying away from the game entirely. Is the World Series, NBA? There'll be something else on Thursday, I'm sure.
Yep, something else to dig on there. By the way, last night, I know you had the over in the Jets-New England game, and it's funny because I had to lean towards the under in that game, and I'm watching it in the first half, and I tweet out myself, said, this is the reason why I stay off games like this when I'm really not sure of. Because it was, 24 it looked like a runaway where it looked like the Patriots didn't even care what the Jets did. It was going to run that up to in the mid-40s at that point. One thing I always get interesting, and I got burned twice last year on the Patriots in big games. And what I mean by that is, a point spread between 14 to 17 or needing a total where they're up big. They do things that are so outside the box and really scratch your head outside of the line of movement. Because even yourself, if you're watching the game, it's 33-0. It's the fourth quarter. The Patriots have a 4th and 2 at the 32-yard line and end up punting the football. But even before they punted the football, they were smart enough to get the delay game knowing the clock would run, and then they go back and get a false start knowing the clock would run. They burn like 1 minute and 40 seconds off without even running a single play. But even when you're talking about the over, whether it's 42 or 43, you expect a field goal there, or for them just to go for it and run the football and maybe even end up getting a touchdown. Does that ever alter your capping at all? Because the Patriots do it. I don't know. Like, football etiquette would have said you at least run the football and said, hey, well, if they can't stop the run, it's not our fault. They punted from the 32, which I believe the punt went down to like the 15 or 16-yard line.
Yeah, no, when you see a game like that with Bill Belichick and company and the game state becomes a little unstable, then it truly turns into a coin flip, because you really don't know what they're going to do. Like, are we going to work on this? Or are we going to work on this? They're not, and you saw even, out of nowhere in the third quarter, they were like, you know what? Let's treat this as a practice. We're going to go no huddle for a drive. And they drive right down the field and scored a touchdown. It's really next to impossible to make any kind of a high confidence projection or play once the game gets out of hand like that and the Patriots are involved, because they're not playing by the same rules as everyone else. They're doing things in a way that you can't ever really project or predict, and it's kind of a fool's errand to try to make sense out of those plays. But we do it anyway because it's fun, and it's going to be an interesting matchup for them this week. Again, tempting to take these points, but who can get in the way of this train? I mean, this Patriots defense I don't think I can find a 7-game sample, even though I know they haven't played anyone. Their opponents are horrible. They're at the bottom of the league. Schedule makers gave them a gift for reasons unknown. Every year after year, they get to play the worst, in the worst division in football, and we know that they're just going to rack up wins. But even still, I don't think you can find a 7-game sample where team defense is played as well as these Patriots have played over the course of this first 7 games this season. It's just absolutely incredible. They've given up 3 touchdowns to opposing offenses, something like 3 or 5 offensive points per game on average here, multiple shutouts. Like, this is 1 passing touchdown to 18 interceptions. Like, these numbers look impossible. Like, it doesn't look like people should be able to do this, and yet here we are. Here they go. This ball hawking, turnover creating unit in the Patriots defense draws Baker Mayfield this week, a guy who can't, he can't help himself but turn it over 2 or 3 times a game. So I really, would have liked an opportunity to back the Browns here off a bye with some, an inflated point spread. But, the turnover factor, I think, keeps me away from this one. What about you?
No, you're exactly correct on that. They're so hard to gauge because it's usually get that little fluky type situations where when we're talking about like for the first 2 weeks of the season, the Patriots defense has outscored the other team's offense. It's a continuing trend where the defense scores every week, and that's something you really don't factor into your spread. A block punt, a safety, or even a pick six. Those are the ones with the bonus points that pull you over the edge. And last year, I just remember one of the it's not really funny because I ended up losing money on it, but you had a late game situation versus the Buffalo Bills last week where they were rolling. I think that to cover 2 touchdowns, and a field goal at the end of the football game would have covered it easy. It was like 7 minutes to go in the game, and it's a 4th and 6 at the 15-yard line going in for the Bills. I'm like, fantastic, not going to go for this. They end up handing the football off instead of kicking the field goal. They got stuffed, and you get a junk touchdown from the Bills. So I'm always leery in second-half situations for the New England Patriots. Let's keep it going here. New York Giants and the Detroit Lions coming up this week at 1 o'clock. Lions suffered a defeat this weekend to the Minnesota Vikings. Got banged up a little bit in the time being, losing a starting running back. Not too sure if Slay's going to come back, but one of the more disappointing efforts I thought this weekend was from the New York Giants at home. That line opens up at -1, closes at 3.5, depending on where you're shopping at. They couldn't stop anything, which seems to be a theme on the season. And yet another win for those Arizona Cardinals. Looking at the spread this week, opening up 7, 6.5 in those areas. But take a look at the over, where it opens up at 48.5, 48. Now we're seeing some 50s coming through on the board this weekend in that game.
Yeah, I get the line movement on the total, but not the side. I don't understand really at all why the Giants are the sharp side here. I think this is that they get an F for their performance last week against the Cardinals at home with extra time to prepare. That was horrific. And on top of that, they rushed back guys on offense in Barkley and Ingram who got hurt again in the game. So now those guys aren't going to be 100% this week. Like, if you were going to trot out that kind of a performance, you might as well leave your guys on the sideline and let them get healthy. So it was a very, very disappointing performance by the Giants, top to bottom. Given that spotting the Cardinals 14 points in that game, that was awful. And I wouldn't expect them to really be competitive in this one. I would expect the Detroit defense, who looked unfocused. And they looked unfocused and out of sorts after that tough break that they suffered on Monday Night Football against the Packers. I would expect that they bounce back a little bit here and dictate some of this game. So I get why the total is going up. There's going to be some garbage points here. Detroit's going to pick their number. I would look for a Detroit team total over on this one if I'm going to have a betting angle at all.
Yeah, it looks like a good one there because when you're taking a look at the Giants, don't think we're going to get Sterling Shepard back at wide receiver. But you're so right. I mean, you say what you want. Running backs, we'll see how long they last in the NFL. Your franchise running back, one of the most talented guys in the league, is coming back. You're not making the playoffs this year, Giants. I don't know what Dave Gettleman thinks about, but it's pouring rain. You're on turf, and you rush the guy back from a high ankle sprain to play in the rain in a game that you're getting thumped, and he ends up hurting it again, running off gingerly to the sidelines. The only thing I could think about is I don't know who is player management who thought this was a good idea, but typically when your team is going to stink, you take your franchise players and say, you know what, we're going to be real cautious in this situation, running it back out there. But you're right, looking at this game, I think there are going to be points, especially from the Detroit side. When you look at what the Giants want to do on defense, 26 points per game, 388 total yards. You can run on them. You can pass on them. Yards per play against their defense, over 6 at this point. There should be some numbers. And again, we don't have to worry about rain, windy conditions. We're going to be sitting in a dome in that game. We'll keep it moving along here on the hour-long episode here, the Audible with me and the Whale Capper. If you're tuning in now, you don't see Jimmy. He's relaxing in Panama. He'll be back to join us later in the week on Friday. Tampa Bay and Tennessee, we talked about a little bit earlier in the show here. This is interesting. And you hit the nail right on the head. Are we going to get that bounce-back performance? Now that we've got some film on Tannehill in the offense that Tennessee runs, can he be equally as effective as he was last week against the Chargers? One would think so when you look at the Tampa Bay defense, but the real question mark here, and I run into this all the time, if I look at Tampa Bay and I say, you know what, I like Tampa Bay. If this line gets to 3, I really like Tampa Bay. Then when I bet the football game with Tampa Bay, where I go, why the hell did I back Jameis Winston in this situation here? What are your thoughts on this game?
I'm going to stick to the Tennessee side for a second because I get you're right. Like, if you're going to back Tampa Bay, you're putting your life in the hands of someone who has no respect for keeping
your money,
preventing a turnover. So best of luck to you there. But The Tennessee side, on the other hand, you know that they're going to want to run. You know that they're going to force the ball to Henry. And I think you have a unit in the Tampa Bay Bucks that can stop the run fairly well. So I think there's going to be a pretty substantial amount of pressure on Tannehill to get it done through the air. And the question is, can he do that? And I think the Tampa Bay secondary is poor enough that he likely will be able to complete some passes through the air. And so I can see a scenario here where, Tampa Bay puts up points. They put a little bit of pressure on Tennessee, and Tennessee has to come back and change their game plan. Instead of running it into stacked boxes, they're going to have to go through the air with Tannehill. And I think they're going to find success. So this sets up as a pretty nice overlook for as far as I can tell you, where I think you're going to have points really coming from both sides here. The only thing that either Tampa Bay gets theirs and Tennessee never adjusts to to the correct approach, and Tampa Bay wins going away, or they do adjust. Tannehill does throw the ball well, and you have kind of a shootout sort of game, which isn't what the market is expecting at this point.
No, you're right. When you take a look at it, you see some 46.5s where they opened up offshore at SBRodds.com, some 47s. And now even in New Jersey at FanDuel, you're seeing 45.5. The one thing that I took out of last week was, look, the Chargers run at an absolute snail's pace. And if the Chargers end up punching in a late touchdown, that game goes into the 50s. We all know Tampa Bay has a propensity to be a boom or bust team. Big-time wide receivers. Godwin's playing amazing on the outside. Then also you have Mike Evans and you had Jameis Winston, who can throw the deep ball, but also can turn it over, which can be a good or bad thing. Something to keep an eye on later in the week. And here we go. We're going to talk a little bit of Bears football here, Whale. 255, 256. The Chargers fresh off a devastating loss, and their season ending up in the opposite direction. The same thing with the Chicago Bears, an embarrassing effort at home. One would think some jobs would be on the line. You would correct some things. But when I look at simplistically in this game, and we've been saying it for a while, anything over 3 or 3.5, how can we trust the Chicago Bears in this type of environment? You know you're going to get decent quarterback play out of Phillip Rivers. Now, they are banged up on the offensive line, lost Lamp, as opposed to already losing Pouncey on the season. This will be a tough one going in there because we do still have some, pride and prominence in that Bears defense. But I'm sorry, if Mitchell Trubisky's going to start and you're laying more than 3, I can't get behind him anymore. And last week was like the final straw saying, you guys are completely inept. And watching the football game, even in the first half alone, watching the series after series after series of the Bears on offense look completely inept. Nobody's running wide open. And even if they do, Trubisky either can't see him or just airmails it all over the place. It's wild. What do we think about this game here in Chicago this weekend?
What are you seeing for a total on this one? Because I kind of want the under.
I got a total across the board right now at 40, even.
Okay. This sets up, I think you brought up a key point about the pace that the Chargers are running. And I think that the Bears defense was not impressive last week. Obviously, the loss of Akeem Hicks is huge because, a lot of their success from their deep, front seven really came from the fact that they had so many guys that you really couldn't pick one or two out to put two hats on. But another offensive lineman goes on injured reserve for the Chargers. Chargers on the road for the second straight week in the middle of the country. Season's over for them. This sets up for a pretty good get-right spot for the Bears defense. I think they put up a hell of an effort, keep the Chargers in like the 13-point range territory. And I think it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Bears come into this and say, oh, yeah, you guys are asking me to run more? You want to see more runs? Fine, we'll run it. That if that may work, in which case the game shortens and the Bears win in an ugly one, or it may not work, in which case they're having trouble to score again, and you have a late effort on the part of Trubisky to try to get a win here. So I think there's a number of different game scripts here that play out pretty well to an under, and the fact that the total got bet down in Chicago last week from 39 to 37.5, and then it went flying over the total. That's probably going to keep some of the folks away from this one. Keep this a little bit inflated on the high side. So give me under 40 on this one, and I kind of like that look a lot actually. The more we talk about it.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you there because when you're taking a look at explosive weapons, that's not really what either one of these teams does, unless obviously you get a kick return for the Chicago Bears. But on offense, it's hard enough just to get first downs and to string stuff together. When you have a hot quarterback that can sort of peel off that 5 or 6 play drive and score a touchdown, that's certainly not what the Bears are doing. And also you're playing with a quarterback that's banged up. You don't want to bench him because you don't want to ruin his confidence completely. But at the same time, he's not running full confidence with himself out there as he runs the offense. And when I watch the Chargers each and every week, unless you press the Chargers and say, you know what, the other team's going to be scoring a lot, the Chargers will engage and say, you know what, we're happy with 0-0 in the first quarter. We'll do our death by 1,000 slants. We'll end up in 3rd and 1 every play, and we'll dump it off to Austin Eckler for a 3-yard gain for a first down and keep the clock moving. Look for some of those type of situations. I agree with you on the under here. A line that hasn't really come out yet. Some of them are at 3.5. Actually, looks like they're readjusting now. Seattle now 5.5. We don't know the status of quarterback Matt Ryan in this football game, but they were absolutely detonated at home last week. Mohamed Sanu is traded now for a second-round pick to the New England Patriots, so it looks like the teardown process is in order. The only thing left is to probably fire Dan Quinn maybe after a week or two, because I don't see them getting a victory here against the Seattle Seahawks. The one interesting thing about the Seahawks is Russell Wilson does it all. Russell Wilson doesn't need an offensive line, but you saw last week again, the MO with the Seahawks is they struggle to win football games at times, but if they beat you, they stay close. Now you're asking the Seattle Seahawks to win by a touchdown on the road in the Dome. The Falcons are a dead team, but yet some people are still going to try to back them. One of the last things, they're last in the league in sacks. And if you're last in the league in sacks going against Russell Wilson, good luck trying to sack him. He's going to make plays out of the pocket. This is a dead team walking here, but do we trust Seattle coming to the East Coast and winning by a touchdown or more here, Will?
I don't think, I would say without a doubt, yes, with the exception of the fact that Dan Quinn is on his last lifeline here. And he was a Pete Carroll guy. I don't think that Pete Carroll is necessarily going to put his foot on Dan Quinn's throat. Maybe he will, but he does not come across as that kind of a guy to me. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if Seattle can get a comfortable lead here. Whether they're going up against Matt Ryan or Matt Schaub is kind of inconsequential as far as I can tell you. And, I don't even have an opinion as to whether I'd rather play a hurt Ryan or a healthy Schaub at this point. I don't think it really matters. And so I do think, you have to kind of look for maybe a second half under sort of a look here. Like if Seattle's in control of the game, they're probably going to shorten this thing up pretty good and just try to get out of town with the win, as opposed to really putting a beat down and an embarrassing loss to kind of end Dan Quinn's tenure in Atlanta, because they're going on bye next week. This is probably his last game as head coach. It should be his last game as head coach. And, this total is a little high. If that exact game script plays out, it probably comes in well under.
Yep, you're a smart guy here, and this is what we like to do. We like to have some fun because, us as cappers, we can probably build a case for either team here. Just a quick synopsis here. If your people are out there saying the line is going to be 5.5, which it looks like it is right now, over under 53, let's just take a look at the side here. Why should we back Atlanta? What's the prognosis of if you're going to back Atlanta, here's how you can feel comfortable doing it. Is there a path for them?
That you would like to be able to make a case for both sides, but this is one where I don't know if I can. It's such a disaster there. I guess here's the case. The case for Atlanta is they're going up against a defense that can be scored on, that can be run on. We just saw, we've seen a number of teams this year really put serious pressure on Seattle's defense. They're not a great unit. They can be passed on. And you have some weapons in the passing game for for Atlanta that are legit. You have multiple sets. Obviously, they just trade Sanu, but you still have Ridley. You still have, you still have Julio, and you have Austin Hooper, who's emerging as a decent target as a tight end. So there's going to be opportunity for you to pass your way back into this game. If you're Atlanta, that opens the door up for a backdoor cover. I think that's probably the only way I could see playing that. I would immediately deconstruct some of that, though, because Atlanta's offensive line is playing so poorly right now, and you're going up against a really hungry, getting healthy unit with Reed back, with potentially Ziggy Ansah back, with Clowney playing up his level week in, week out here. So this has a potential for, if you throw an injured Matt Ryan out there, he gets hurt again, or if you throw Schaub out there, then you're basically waving the white flag on this game in your season. So I don't know if there's any there's any number where I can say, yeah, it makes sense to take the points with Atlanta in this one.
259, 260, recency bias be damned. Sam Darnold and the Jets are still going to play football for the rest of the year, even though they saw some ghosts last night versus New England Patriots. Look, he can barely score or even move the football against the Patriots. You're seeing that week in and week out. You are going to get a little bit more room with Jacksonville. Gives about 21 points per game on defense, 5.7 yards per play on defense. But how much can we trust? I mean, you're talking about a quarterback that was absolutely shook last night, now getting ready on a short week and heading out on the road. Jacksonville picks up the victory last week. Now, if we're taking a look overall at some lines here, Jacksonville -6, -5.5 across the board. Over/under sitting at 41.5. Minshew mania down in Jacksonville. But can we trust the Jets to have a bounce-back effort? Their defense is going to come to play, but the problem is, can we see some offense? We saw it last week versus Dallas. We didn't see it versus New England. Can it reappear, Whale, this weekend down in Jacksonville?
I'm tempted to say no. Not just because a performance that bad from Darnold when you're a quarterback that's that young, that has a tendency to linger a little bit. I was on the over last night because I thought they would be competitive. I thought we would see more of the type of play we had from Darnold against that Dallas team. I thought he would even be able to step it up a little bit because he's another week removed from that illness. And also we've seen him play in primetime spots before. He's stepped up his performance. He was great in his debut on Monday Night Football on the road against Detroit. He was moving the offense effectively. So I was really surprised to see them stall out so horribly. And, a lot of credit to the Patriots defense there. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if you see a more conservative approach here from Adam Gase and company, where they're just like, okay, we're not going to turn the ball over. We're going to take the points when we get into the red zone. We're going to go for field goals here. We're going to field position game. We're going up against a rookie quarterback. I think Greg Williams' defense is poor. I do not like the way he coordinates that defense, but I'll tell you what, even in the loss last night, even in the embarrassment that was playing out on the field, they still played hard. That defense played, up to the moment, which is not saying a lot, obviously, conceding 33 points or whatever, but still they were tackling well. They weren't giving the Patriots the opportunity to have, this blowout plays and give up the game. So I would kind of think that this defense is live to play well, that the offense is going to play a little bit conservatively, which all leads me to this is probably a nice spot to look for an under. I know you took the over in the Jags-Bengals game last week, which came through. Do you have any warning? Are you nervous at all about this? Do you think that the Jags are live for an over score? Because, honestly, like the one thing that the Greg Williams' defense does well is they prevent you from hitting them over the top, and that's really kind of the way that the Jags have been moving the ball most effectively, was with the deep passes. They're not really a dink and dunk kind of team, and that's really the only way to kind of sustain drives against the Jets defense. So I think this plays for an under spot, even with the low total at 41.5. What's your read on that?
No, I completely agree with you. And the reason being is you're right. When you take a look at Monday Night Football and how the Jets played, they're not going to bench Sam Darnold, but there's going to be a reset on offense. And since he was that poor, the reset is not, hey, let's just throw all bygones be bygones and go 4 wide, 5 wide, and let's just air it out and see if we can, shake off the ghost or whatever he was saying. That's not going to take place. When you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, 21st in the NFL, I believe, in rushing, about 117 yards a game. This smells like, you know what? Let's go down there. Let's lean on Le'Veon Bell. Let's lose some play action pass. Let's just get some confidence in the quarterback. Confidence in the quarterback doesn't mean we're going to score 21 points in the first half. It means let's just get some first downs. Let's get some good mojo going. And the same thing on the opposite side when you're taking a look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. What are they going to do? Hey, look, this kid's really struggling on offense here. Let's make it, you know what? Let's make him beat us. We're going to play some real simple coverages out here. Let's see if he takes the underneath stuff. We'll just tackle and see how it ends up. I don't see big plays in this ball game, Well. So I do agree with you with the under look in this one. If we keep it moving, 261, 262, my Philadelphia Eagles, who I don't know what the hell was going on Sunday night all week long. I'm saying, you know what, they got a chance because they're going to miss Lael Collins on offense. They're going to miss Tyron Smith on one side. They're going to miss Amari Cooper. We're going to be in this ball game, and the Eagles just completely did not show up. Now you're going, and I know the statistics out here, the third straight. We're not just talking about 3 road games where you're just playing some mincemeat. You go on the road to Minnesota and get tagged. You go on the road to Dallas and get tagged, and now you're going to go play the 5-1 Buffalo Bills in New York, fresh off a victory over the Miami Dolphins. You see the lines open up, 1.5, 2, now sitting at 2.5 across the board, 1.5 still at some New Jersey outlets, which is probably just because the Eagles fans that are betting it and keeping that down, but primarily 2s and 2.5s. I don't know what to expect from the Eagles, but I know I'm going to get an honest effort from the Buffalo Bills. The Eagles are dragging, and it looks like the front office ownership is going to say, hey, you know what, guys? We're fine. We're not really going to get anybody back here. Deshaun Jackson probably not going to play. Let's just see what happens this weekend, which is a recipe for disaster. The one thing that was interesting last week is we thought Ryan Fitzpatrick coming into quarterback would give a little bit of a boost to the Dolphins, which it did, but Buffalo still put up 31 points thanks to a Micah Hyde return of a onside kick late in the ball game. The game was a lot closer. And look, the Bills were down for a good portion of this game. But, I just don't have any faction of hope for the Philadelphia Eagles the way they're playing football right now. Almost looks like they quit last week versus Dallas.
It does. It feels like it. And it's crazy that a team that is 1.5 years removed from celebrating a championship looks like they quit on their coach. What is going on? I don't understand it. I've backed the Eagles both the last 2 weekends and lost. And I'm sitting here staring at this number, and I'm like, I cannot believe that Josh Allen is favored over this team. And I know the situation is terrible. I know this is their 3rd week in a row on the road. I know that their defense is playing extremely poorly right now, but this is it. You have got to go all in if you are the Eagles in this spot. Like, the Bills are coasting to a wild card in a horrible AFC. They're going to get there with 9 or 10 wins. It doesn't matter. This is not as meaningful a game for them at all. This is the Eagles' season. If you lose this game, forget about it. But pack it up. Put Wentz on ice. Let your guys get healthy. Like, this is it right here. And if we don't see an honest effort from Philly, it's going to be super disappointing. The question is, am I going to be watching it, hoping that the Eagles get back into the season, or am I going to be betting on them and riding with them to the end, which it does have the whiff of being? So, I think that the Bills overall are one of the more fraudulent 5-1 teams we've ever seen in the NFL, and they can be beaten by a team that plays up on the right day. And I'm hopeful that that's this weekend with the Eagles, but I don't know if I have the stomach to go to war with them again financially. We'll see.
No, it's a tough one. I actually had it before the season when we were just trying to size up, some situations on the Eagles' schedule. I actually had them going 1-2 through the stretch, but I was figuring they could possibly beat Minnesota or Dallas and then maybe get that one where they're look-ahead type situation game on the Buffalo Bills on the road and getting the Bills in one of those environments where, they're always tough at home. They're playing well, but certainly not the case in this one. It'll be interesting to see. 263, 264 Cincinnati and the Rams. We saw the Rams bounce back, get the boost from Jalen Ramsey, blow out Atlanta. Cincinnati just being Cincinnati, there's a good shot when you take a look at the schedule. Will Cincinnati be able to pick up a win anywhere, much like the Miami Dolphins? This line opens up at 13 offshore. Actually, Chris is showing a -10.5, but 13.5 are now showing up with an over-under 48 to 48.5. Are the Rams finally getting right here? And should we be trusting them now to cover a double-digit spread, more like 2 touchdowns here, Will?
I think they can. I think they can pitch a shutout against this Bengals team. This Bengals team is horrible. They don't match up at all well with the Rams in terms of what they're going to be able to do offensively, sustain drives, move the ball, score points. I'm not seeing it. I think the Rams cover here. I would consider laying the points. I'm going to think hard about this one, and we'll circle back on Friday. But this looks like a spot where the Rams played very, very well the last time they went to London. They are not doing exactly the same travel schedule. This time they're staying on the East Coast at Georgia Tech. I believe they're practicing this week, and they'll be flying to London on Thursday or Friday. So they'll be adjusted to the body clocks. The time shouldn't be an issue. It's not even an early start. It's a standard 1:00 Eastern time kickoff. So this is a spot where we would expect the Rams to kind of assert their dominance, get the win. This is a home game that they've lost here, so they need it. And you can't lose ground right now to San Francisco 49ers, who are just streaking. You can't lose. You have to make up a little bit of ground because you lost head-to-head against the Seahawks. So this is not one where the Rams can take this lightly. They have to bring out their best effort. They're going to a bye next week, so they can really kind of lay out a little bit. And it looks like the move for Ramsey made a huge impact in the way that their defense played against the Falcons last week. So I would expect the Rams to get this cover. I would think that the under is a fair look because I could potentially see a world where the game looks an awful lot like what we saw last night, where the Patriots just embarrassed the Jets.
Yeah, it's an interesting look because also with Cincinnati, not rushing guys back from injury, A.J. Green at least another week away, so he's not going to be able to help out the wide receiving core. And we saw last week, your best two defensive pass rushers are out, your best cornerbacks are out. Are we rushing them back, taking them on the plane overseas to get ready for this game when you don't have a win on the season and it's basically a loss? We'll see what takes place and watching some of those practice reports as the week goes on. This game also is an interesting one here, 265, 266, Arizona, New Orleans. The reason it being is because we have a quarterback fighting to get on the field field and saying, boy, I really want to play this week. So maybe some bookmakers holding back. I see some early lines up, the 10s and the 9.5s. But taking a look at Pinnacle and Chris, I don't actually have any updated numbers for them. Kyler Murray, Teddy Bridgewater, we would anticipate will be in this football game. Arizona been a live dog as of late, playing good football, winning on the road last week. Much different task here, going down into the Dome, playing a New Orleans team that is locked and loaded on defense and playing extremely well. One of those environments that's going to be extremely loud for a young quarterback and a young head coach. But I like the spunk that Arizona's showing on the season. Do we trust? Let's just say the line comes out, stays the same as where it is. Drew Brees doesn't start, and it's Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater as a double-digit favorite. Are we buying this?
No. I wouldn't hesitate to lay the points on that Rams game, but this is not a spot I'm laying the points. Even if it's Breeze, this is a team in the Cardinals now that has gotten the taste of a win. They know what it takes to compete in the league, and they're going to come and play hard for 4 quarters and potentially backdoor you if you lay the points here. I got to give a huge amount of credit to the Saints defense for carrying them largely in the absence of Drew Brees. And this actually sets up for the Saints defense kind of taking their foot off the gas a little bit. Like, all right, we played our hearts out. We put all of our effort into all these games here to make sure we secured all these wins, keep our season alive. Now we get this team. We're double-digit favorites to them. Like, we're going into the bye next week, and then we'll come back out and we'll make our stretch run here. I could see a situation where the Saints defense lets up a bit and gets surprised by a pretty feisty unit in Arizona, who scored 27 last week and easily could have been 37. They were moving the ball with ease. They just had a couple of weird turnovers that kept them from blowing that top off that game. So I think this is a spot where the Cardinals are live, and if anything, I would look for an over.
Yeah, on the Friday show, we'll know a little bit more about who's going to be a quarterback. I can't imagine Drew Brees getting rushed back and then going through the bye. Why don't you just take the week off, get the victory, which you think they're going to get if they're going to be favored by double digits, especially at home, and have him healthy coming out of the break. Oakland and Houston, 2 tough losses for these 2 teams last week, both on the road. Oakland goes in to Green Bay, was playing pretty well, key moment in the game. Derek Carr doesn't understand the role of don't try to be Superman and dive and throw the football through the end zone, which he continually does year to year to year. That was a huge moment in that game. But also taking a look at Houston. If we watch that Houston game versus Indianapolis, it was pretty clear Indianapolis again has their number and was the much better football team. Will Fuller goes down on the first drive of the game with a hamstring injury, so more Kenny Stills this week, more Kiki Kuti to go along with DeAndre Hopkins in that one. But Oakland, look, even though they got beaten Green Bay is on fire. Green Bay got a little bit of help back getting the wide receivers healthy. We'll see if Devontae Adams does play in the next week or 2 in some situations. But looking at this game on its head, over-underwear opened up at 48 at Chris, now at 51. Are we buying the over in this game? Can we get enough schematics from Oakland in order to move the football here? Or is this one of those games where Bill O'Brien just says, you know what, offense just isn't working out here. We're going to rely on our quarterback, and some things go a little haywire late. It's interesting to see because Houston back into that role where 6.5, they got to win by a touchdown here as opposed to playing as a dog last week.
Yeah, I know it's a nice bounce back spot for Houston, but I don't think I could advocate laying the points. I feel like even the Packers cover last week was relatively lucky. If you kind of break down the box score a little bit, that could have very easily been a 42 to 40-39 type of game. A lot of points left on the field for Oakland. Oakland's offense can move. They're getting healthy with the wide receiver position and the tackle. I would love. I mean, if Trent Brown goes. Mm-hmm. Then this is an over because you're going to be able to neutralize the singular defensive player on the Texans that matters, and you're going to be able to give Carr time to pick apart a really, really poor secondary. We saw Houston just made a deal to take a guy off of the Raiders roster who the Raiders were probably going to cut at some point, and who's a failure of a first-round pick. And the likelihood, just that tells you that that's how bad things are with their secondary. So many of their top guys who weren't that good to begin with are going to be out. And on the flip side, the Raiders aren't stopping anyone through the air. Aaron Rodgers carved them up. I would expect Deshaun Watson to do much of the same. He's not going to have Will Fuller out there, which stinks. But I like that, there's some guys that have stepped up in the absence of Fuller. especially in the passing attack that can be threats in this game. So I would look for an over here. I would expect that it's a close game, and I'm kind of hopeful that the Raiders shock the world and pull off an upset, but that's a little bit because I have some existing Colts liabilities that I thought were dead and gone, and may just have a little bit of life left. So we'll see how it all plays out. But this is a good spot to look for an over, in my opinion.
269, 270, Carolina and San Francisco. Carolina fresh off a bye. Carolina, we saw Cam Newton warming up at practice, but Riverboat Ron says, nope, not this week. We're going to go with Kyle Allen again. Last week in the rain, the side of a really good football team is playing under certain situations, under duress, going on the road in a game where you couldn't run your offense. It was just going to be who's going to be tougher than the other team. A 9-0 shutout win for San Francisco. Very impressive on the season already. We'll see if they can continue it here versus Carolina. Looking at some of the odds here at SBRodds.com. Opened up at 6, but now sitting at 5.5 across the board. We have seen some success with football teams, obviously getting the extra week off, getting ready to prepare. You also get some extra help for the 49ers. They trade for Emmanuel Sanders at wide receiver. If they can get even more help back on the offensive line, this team is really well coached. The front seven brings it. We haven't seen, look, Kyle Allen is winning at quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. No question about it. But they're not winning because he's their quarterback, basically. You're getting a lot of help from defense. All-world running back that's doing everything. They're going to run up against a tough bunch here, but are we going to trust and say, you know what, I think that with the rest, they're going to be ready for this game. It'll be a close one. Where do you see the 49ers say, you know what, they're a runaway train right now, and they're getting some help back and maybe even getting healthier as we go here, Will?
Yeah, I think you actually hit all sides of that and kind of pointed to why this is such a tough handicap. My gut reaction was, take the points. Panthers are alive. Like, I feel like I looked at the Niners schedule a couple of weeks ago and kind of looked down and I was like, that's going to be their loss. It was after the Rams game. I thought they were going to lose to the Rams, but they didn't. And then you look, you're like, well, they're not losing to the Redskins. I could see the Panthers coming off a bye, giving them some help. But at the same time, I don't love the matchup for the Panthers offense against this defense. They have an outstanding and athletic front four. Fred Warner versus CMC is going to be a show. I would not expect you to see Panthers put up a particularly impressive total here, which means they're going to have to get it done on the defense on their side of the ball, and they have been doing that. I mean, we saw them do it against the Texans team. We know the Texans are capable of going for 30 a game, and the Panthers held them to 10. So that's their recipe for success here. If you were Carolina and you were coming in here, you're trying to keep it low scoring, and you're trying to execute in the special teams and get your field goals and play a little bit of field position here. And I think to a degree that's where the Niners are right now too. You can't really lean on Jimmy G to get it done through the air. You have to kind of have a nice mix of mostly of a run heavy approach. And I do agree with you that their coaching in the Niners is superlative. Shanahan has really matured into an outstanding coach, and you'd love to see it. But this is going to be a tough test for them. I have a funny feeling this comes down to a field goal either way, so I don't mind taking the points, even though you can't get 6 anymore. You can only get 5.5. I think the points are probably the right play, and I think under is a very solid look here too. I got a little bit of under on the opener at 42.5. I thought that was a really poor line. I know it's down in the 40.5 range. I still think under in that game is pretty live because I think defense dictates this one. It's going to feel a little short. It's going to feel a little bit compressed, and winning team probably has about 20 points.
We'll save the Sunday night game and the Monday night game for Friday's show once Jimmy comes back. We have 2 more games to cover here, 271, 272. Denver and Indianapolis, Flacco and Brissett. Flacco was absolutely atrocious, which way I know you had the Kansas City Chiefs in that game, an easy walk-away winner, even without Patrick Mahomes, who went down in the second quarter of that football game. So that leads me to believe, looking at Denver going on the road this weekend, obviously it looks like their season pretty much done at this point, trading away Emmanuel Sanders. We can only wonder when Chris Harris is going to get moved, maybe even if Von Miller gets moved. The GM and the team is always going to say, we're going to still try, we're going to still play, but you saw Emmanuel Sanders get traded early this week, so obviously if the right choice comes along and the right draft pick status, they're going to be moved. Looking at this game, opened up at 6, 6.5, opened up at 5 at Chris, so some differentiating numbers coming out, but it looks like we're settling in at 6 across the board without Emmanuel Sanders. The one thing that's interesting about the Indianapolis Colts is they're a really well-coached team, but when you look at their victories, not really, but look, they're either going to lose, probably going to lose close, but their wins coming from right around a touchdown or less, and that's what you're anticipating anticipating this weekend. Denver playing pretty well on defense. We'll see how they get that going in the Dome. But, hey, look, Indianapolis is going to be ready to play. I can't trust Joe Flacco. I just can't trust him well in the pocket anymore, making the wrong decisions, the wrong reads, even in a blowout against a horrendous defense with Kansas City. He looked completely inept. I wonder if the quick hook might be coming in this ball game. 6s across the board, 43.5 on the total here, Will.
Yeah, problem with the quick hook is I don't know if the guy that you're replacing him with is any better. I don't know if you saw much of Locke in the preseason. We didn't get to see much of him because he got hurt. And I was never really a fan of him in college either. So not so sure that was the right answer. And I think a lot of that can be hung around the neck of John Elway, who's not great at evaluating quarterbacks, as we know. Either way, this has a lot of the same whiffs of the Raiders going to Indianapolis and kind of stunning the Colts earlier this season. Colts coming off of a big win. Obviously, prior to the Raiders game, Colts were a small favorite against Atlanta, and they were just throttled them. They were outstanding, all three phases. They kicked butt. They got a win. They patted themselves in the back, and they came out the next week flat. A lot of the similar whiffs about this game, which is keeping me from laying the points with the Colts. I think again, that's not enough of a differentiating factor for me to want to get involved taking anything to do with the Broncos right here. Got to be a ton of questions in that locker room about, is Flacco our guy? He really set that team up to fail, taking all those sacks and having such poor pocket awareness. Still a ton of pieces missing for the Colts in their defensive secondary. So if Flacco happens to have a live game, you could see a scenario where that they are the ones putting pressure on the Colts here, but this one's a pretty easy, obvious stay away from me. The only thing I'll note about the Colts, it was interesting that through all of the previous weeks this season, they were really not asking Jacoby Brissett to do very much. They were really keeping his game plan pretty simple. His depth of target was short. They were relying heavily on the run game and their offensive line, and then they kind of unleashed him in that Texans game. They let him throw the ball down the field. They let him get a little creative. And that was an interesting sign for a future kind of, don't necessarily take what you've seen so far from the Colts and expect that is the team that they want to be from here on through the rest of the season. I think they would like to get, Brissett more reps throwing the ball down the field in the passing game. And I think you could see them be a little bit, I think they know that even beyond just if we want to win the South, I think if we want to be, considered contenders in the AFC and make a little bit of a playoff noise here, I think we're going to have to be more effective passing the ball, and that's the direction they want to go in. And $1 million question for you, Donnie. Was Frank Reich the brains behind the Philly Super Bowl?
Yeah, we're kind of getting the look here in Philadelphia. It's like, what if the three coaches that were here, that, great group, that their mind was in game, who was actually third in line? Was it DiFilippo? Was it Frank Reich? Or was it Dougie P? Because right now, the way the Eagles are looking, very slow on offense and very uncreative, when you're right. You see Frank Reich going to the bye week here, and all of a sudden they pop out and start tossing the ball deep, putting up some points. And you know what? Do you want to factor us in that we can't do this? Watch me scheme this and show you that we can do it. It's a very interesting question, because Doug P is catching a lot of heat as a player's coach, but now we have chirping in the locker room from the Eagles side that's, getting after certain things that would never happen. And yes, this wasn't a Super Bowl back in 2008. It was 2017. You made the playoffs and were one Alshon Jeffrey drop probably from going to the NFC Championship game. And how quickly it's certainly being unraveled at this point, man.
Yep. Amazing.
If we take a look at the last game here, we're at 273, 270. I got to tell you, I look at this game and I say to myself, because I was on Cleveland versus the Seattle Seahawks, and I was patting myself on the back in the first half. But then again, you know what you get yourself into. Russell Wilson is never out of a football game. We know that. But never underestimate the stupidity of a head coach that can't get his team to do the right things, and that's Freddie Kitchens. And then compound that with a quarterback that loves to throw interceptions, and now throwing the New England Patriots defense and Bill Belichick's confusing style. I have to tell you, it's early in the week. I see the 13. Well, I want to be all over the Browns. Oh, my God. Greedy Williams will probably be back. Denzel Ward's going to be back. They had a week to prepare. They were embarrassed last week. It's too many points. They have weapons at wide receiver. They can run the football. They'll keep it close. But then I just look at the sideline and the 10-cent head quarterback and say, what the hell am I doing? How can I bet this game?
Yeah. It's points or nothing, which is insane, because you have to decide, am I really going to get on the side of one of the most clear and obvious coaching disadvantages across all of the NFL. Freddie Kitchens may grow into a fine NFL coach. I don't think we will ever have a podcast together where we are talking about Freddie Kitchens is awesome or great or a top tier coach in this league, but he may become average at some point. Clearly right now, though, he is in the bottom 5, and it's not particularly up for discussion, in my opinion. He is coaching extremely poorly, and this is going to be a humongous mismatch. That said, the Patriots' offense is fool's gold. They had 10 days or 11, sorry. They had a super extended rest, lots of practice to prep for that Jets game, and they looked sharp as can be coming out. They're like, oh, we know exactly what Greg Williams' defense is going to give us, and we will take it, and we will take it, and we will take it until they adjust, and then we will beat them over the top, and then we will smother them and put the game away. Like, it was a perfect game plan. I don't know that there is exactly that game plan and that time afforded here for them this week in a short week. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're like, wow, man, Patriots, hey, they made a deal for Mohamed Sanu, but this offense still really isn't clicking. They're really not getting it done. And I think that there's a possibility that, that it's just going to be like this all year with the Pats, where we're like, the offense can't really score, but then the defense turns around and they create 4 turnovers, take 2 to the house, and you're like, well, they got to 30, so you can't beat them, So it's a really, really tough handicap. I think 13 points is probably 7 too many. I would have made this maybe before last night even. I would have made this excuse me. I would have made this about a 6-point game. So the fact that you can get 13 now is tons of value, but there's also there is a long history and lots of dead bodies of people who have taken value and taken the points when there was line value against the Pats and it didn't work out. So this one's like a soul searching type of play here before you hit submit on Browns. And under was a decent look on the opener. I thought that was a pretty bad opener. I would have made this about a 44-point game. I think it opened at 48. It got bet down pretty quickly. I think that was the right direction. But really, like, the true line value in this one by any numerical model is going to be on the Browns. The question is whether or not you can stomach being on such a disadvantaged side as far as coaching goes.
Yeah, the way too early look at the weather report there in Foxborough for Sunday, 55 degrees and light rain, so we'll keep an eye on that as it goes along. The one interesting thing is every week there, regardless if you're a fan of a football team or not, you usually have a marquee game. And we're not going to talk about it now, but the Green Bay-Kansas City game should have been an absolute 10-bell ringer, toe-to-toe, 2 MVP-style quarterbacks going up against each other, and now we're going to get Matt Moore and Aaron Rodgers. So thank goodness, Whale, that we are gamblers and we have fun breaking games down and betting on games where we can make them watchable, because overall as a product this week, there's not one game I'm saying, you know what, if I'm just a common guy, I work 9 to 5, I like to enjoy my team on Sunday, and I'm saying to myself, what the hell are we going to get ready for in this game? If you have one game that you're looking at this week, early week, and say, you know what, I want to focus on this game, what game would it be for you, Will?
Boy, if you had asked me this last week, I would have said Packers-Chiefs. This is the game of the year, maybe. Yeah. Like, I can't wait to see Aaron Rodgers down there in Arrowhead. This is going to be – and honestly, like, this is – if were it not for Matt Moore, this is the perfect sell-high spot on the Packers. They're overrated, in my opinion. They are not as – as impressive defensively as what we saw through the first couple of weeks. They can be, you can gain yards on this team. You can score points on them. They're not great in the red zone. They're opportunistic. They can make they have moments of impressive coverage. But overall, you can really put a hurting on this team if you have the right pieces. And Kansas City has them all, except for the quarterback now. So I don't know how I'm going to approach this game. I'm probably going to pass, but it really set up well for a sell high on Green Bay, and I don't think you can do it just yet because of this quarterback matchup.
Yep, and don't sleep on Big Red with those backup quarterbacks. I mean, it was a little while ago, back in 2002, where Coy Detmer and A.J. Feely were playing very well for Donovan McNabb, holding the place in order for them to get to the NFC title game. We'll review all of that and more on Friday on the Audible when Jimmy comes back. So the 3-weave motion will be back in effect. I want to thank Will Capper for joining us on a Tuesday and pinch hitting to help us out, and certainly having a lot of fun here on the channels itself. But NFL football is where it's at. We'll be back on Friday at 4 p.m. For Will Capper, I'm Donnie RightSide. Join us on Friday. Jimmy will be back. Thank you for joining us here in the chat box on sportsbookreview.com's The Audible. Take care, guys.